It is 6:30, friends. This is the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute from the University of South Dakota. I am so glad you are back here. As you probably know, maybe you're joining us for the first time, but we had our first session of this last month, and we didn't get to ask all of our questions. So Mike is back, and he's ready to ask more questions. We're going to see what we can learn tonight. I am so glad you all joined us. Oh, there's Marlon. Hi. Good to see you all. And let's get started. I suggest you watch this in speaker view. And just so you know, we are recording tonight. If you don't want your face to be on the recording, you can shut off your camera. It won't affect you seeing us or you being able to hear us. It just won't show you. So here we go. Mike, take it away.
All right, thanks so much. And again, Thea, we just can't thank you enough for the platform. That's just awesome. We greatly appreciate it. Now, first of all, before I get into this, I watched the last one, and I just want to make something clear for the folks who maybe saw that, maybe you didn't. But during the course of that, I said that over the course of the years, I had never used the word gritty or gym rat or gutsy or that sort of thing to describe a person of color. I'm a sportscaster. And what I was saying was, I have been perpetuating stereotypes over the course of the years, even though I didn't know it. And Marcia, you were even kind enough to kind of give me an out to clarify there, and I didn't take advantage of it. But I'm taking advantage of it tonight. But those are the little things in life. I will look at the way that I call games differently from now on, and have started to make those changes, so that because that was just what I heard. I never heard, people of color described that way. It was always the short white kid. So there you go. We're going to start by introducing our panel, and we're going to start with Marcia. And before I get to that, we'll just let each of you kind of introduce yourself, panelists. Tim, I've still got you on mute if you want to check on that, please. Marcia, are you out in California being a good Unchi?
No, I am. I'm back.
Oh, okay.
I got back last night.
Oh, okay. But yeah, you did spoil the grandkids, right?
Yeah, stepped off the plane and I was in shock.
I believe that.
Yes, I spent a lot of time with the Takojas.
All right, awesome. Why don't you introduce yourself and give us a little background?
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. My name is Marcia Zephier. I'm an enrolled member of the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe here in South Dakota. I grew up in Flandreau, South Dakota, just a little bit north of Sioux Falls here. And the reason I was born and raised in Flandreau, South Dakota is that my mom and dad were both lifelong educators at the Flandreau Indian School, which is an off-reservation boarding school for students in grades 9 through 12. I grew up in Flandreau, and then I went on to college and got my bachelor's degree from Northern State University, and went immediately into the teaching profession. So I spent 34 and a half years in public education, 33 of those years here in Sioux Falls. I've also been an adjunct professor at the University of Sioux Falls for the past, well, this is my 14th year there, and done a lot of staff development and in-service and, those types of activities for professional educators. I have 2 grown kids who I just got the opportunity to see this past weekend. I hadn't seen them because of COVID in 8.5 months. So I took the leap and I got on a plane and I went out to California, picked up my son in Denver on the way, and we spent almost 10 days out there. I have a daughter, son-in-law out there, and I have 3 takojas. So when Mike said, were you being a good unchi? Unchi is grandmother in Lakota. And so I hope I was being a good unchi, but yeah, I got to spend some quality time with them, and it fed my soul, let's put it that way. So I'm back here and I'm feeling energized after spending some quality time with my family.
Awesome. I'm glad you got back. I'm glad you got that opportunity too. Marlon, good evening. How you doing? You're next.
I am Marlon. Can everybody hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me. Beautiful. Head nods works too. Oh yeah, see, I got the crowd attention. Yes. I am Marlon Lobban. I'm originally from California. I've been in South Dakota for approximately 13 years this February. I came here for football. University of Sioux Falls, finished there in 2010. Been kind of working with the kids since then, and kind of transitioned my career into property management now, but I still work with people. I still mentor kids. I actually work with Tim. Tim's been one of my mentors long as he knows it. Maybe 9 or 10 years now, Tim. So Tim and I have been really close knit for a while, whether it's working with kids or just talking about life to life. Since the last time we met, I did notice that I got some grays from quarantining. I don't know if you guys can see them, but I got some grays in there. My wife told me I need to cut it. So yeah, everything's been good, and my kids are still growing. And actually, what part of California you were in, Marcy, if you don't mind me asking?
I was in the Sacramento area, so my daughter lives in Rockland.
Oh, well, what? See, sorry to go off subject. Marcy, you should have visited my family. My brother he just moved to Auburn Hills from Rockland, so.
Right there.
Yeah, right there. So yeah, me and Marcy connected for sure. But yeah, so I'm a little further down north in the northern Bay Area, but at the end of the day, I know exactly where you were, Marcy. Originally from California, like I said, I'm just a kid here, trying to learn and continue to develop and be with other people and try to impact people in a different way that other people have views of other people.
All right, and Marlon, I had to put you in between the University of Sioux Falls, in between the two Northern Wolves. Next up is the guy who is I knew it. Next up is the guy who really organized an organization in South Dakota this summer called HEAL, and he's a real reason that we were able to put this together and find this forum. Excellent football coach, excellent man, Tim Hughes. Tim?
Hey, thanks for having me again. Marcia, I feel like we're going to connect as well. What part of Denver does your son live in? Is he in Denver?
Yeah, he's in Denver.
Okay. I grew up in Aurora, so
okay. Yeah.
Aurora, Colorado. My mom lives in Denver now. My sister lives in Denver now. We're in a few wolves. This whole connection thing is getting to be too much. But,
it is. Kevin Bacon.
That's right. Anyway, yeah, grew up in Aurora, Colorado. Came to Northern State via Snow College out in Utah. I spent 2 years in Utah and then transferred to Northern State up in Aberdeen. Moved to Sioux Falls, and what I thought was going to be a short stay and has turned into about 25 years or so, almost 25 years. So high school teacher, teach high school English and U.S. history. Also coach, did a lot of high school coaching, stepped aside from that a few years back. I have a senior in high school right now, so wanted to be able to watch him play during his high school career. And so coaching a younger one who was an 8th grader. Marlon and I have been coaching a youth travel football team for the past 5 years, and he's been on that. So like Marlon said, we've been mentoring kids now for about 10 years together. And so having fun doing that, but really just was looking for an opportunity to have a conglomerate of voices come together and try to heal, and as the acronym says, try to heal and make things better for the country and the world we live in, not only for us, but for generations to come. So that was kind of the impetus for getting this all started. So really appreciate you having me.
All right. And for folks, by the way, for those of you not from South Dakota, when Marcia said, the Kevin Bacon, for Kevin Bacon, I think, is it 6 or 7 degrees? And for South Dakota, it's 2. All right. It literally, there's only 800,000 of us up here. So we're going to connect with people. If it's more than 2, you're really not trying very hard.
Correct.
All right. So last time we got to some of the lighter type of things. What do we call people? What do we do as far as when it comes to cultures and those types of things? This week, we wanted to get just a little bit deeper on that. Because so many of us, I think, hear these phrases, and while we think we may understand what they mean, I'm not sure that I do in the terms of looking at it through the eyes of a person of color. Consequently, I'm delighted to have these folks here with us. They have been very open and honest. Tim, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
We have heard the word marginalized an awful lot over the course of the years, when we're especially recently. We're mostly focusing on recent events. What exactly does it mean to be marginalized? Because I'll be honest with you, I won the lottery. I'm a white guy in the Midwest. So every door in the world is open to me. White privilege is real and it exists and I'm living it. So what does it mean to be marginalized?
I think to be marginalized for me means to be thought less of. And it may not necessarily be an outwardly, you're lower than me, but to be, I always use the example, the expectation is for you to act a certain way or to do certain things because that's all you are. Well, yeah, I've always used the story about going to school at Northern. And initially, all I was an athlete. I couldn't have been smart enough to be in school. I couldn't have had the grades to be in college without having performed on a football field, our basketball court, our baseball diamond, or running around the track. Those type of opinions, those type of things are what marginalize individuals because you're putting them into a little round, little square peg. And I felt like being judged in that way was doing not only me a disservice, but doing my mom a disservice and my dad a disservice, the people who valued education, who pushed me to be better, who didn't set these bounds for me and didn't call me a football player. If anything, my parents were the exact opposite. If your grades weren't good, you didn't have to worry about football. You didn't have to worry about basketball. You didn't have to worry about track, baseball, or anything else because all of that was going to be off the table. So when you, in that regard, when I was being told that the only reason that I was there was because I was good at football, that is making me lesser than. The idea that I couldn't be something because it isn't something that you're used to seeing is a marginalizing quality for the people that you're putting it up against. So that's kind of a marginalization thing from that standpoint in my experience. But I know people who've had it in a lot of different ways, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in education or schools or whatever the case may be. It might be with jobs in terms of, you would never be able to work this type of job. Well, why not? We've never had anybody. I mean, I at one time, and at one time I was the only African-American football coach in the state of South Dakota. And in a lot of ways, it's a big burden, but a lot of people weren't willing to give people that opportunity, people of color, that opportunity in this state. It wasn't something that was thought of that could be handled with someone with my skin tone. I was good to be an assistant. I was good to be a volunteer coach or something of that nature. But to be a head coach, you have to, the thought process, and even now in the NFL or in college, is you have to look a certain way and you have to behave a certain way. And sometimes the people who are hiring, they're going to hire in a way that represents what they believe that is. So.
Wonderful. Marcia, I'm going to you next. Same question.
Okay, same question. So what is marginalization?
Yep. And have you ever experienced it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, many times. So marginalization to me means exclusion and discrimination. So for me, that shows up in a lack of respect and representation in areas where we don't have a voice. We're not invited to the table and we don't have a voice. And that's happened to me many, many times in my career, even as late as, 5, 6, 7 years ago when I was, active at the state level, making decisions on behalf of Indigenous people without having Indigenous people giving any input. And I don't understand it. To me, it's a total lack of respect. And that's where I've experienced it. And the way that shows up, particularly in Indigenous communities, is seeing such things as derogatory stereotypes, overrepresentation in the legal system. Our men, our Lakota, Dakota, Nakota men are highly overrepresented in the prison system, as well as, African-American men. And these two gentlemen can attest to that as well. And so it shows up in those ways. It shows up in the effect would be, people having identity crises. For example, I'm Native American. They're making decisions about education in the state of South Dakota, but they're not asking me for my input. So how does that make me feel? It makes me feel like I'm not worthy, like I'm not a member of the group. It gives our kids low self-esteem, low self-concept, stress. And those types of things manifest themselves in such things as drug and alcohol abuse and depression and things like that. So, for me, it's the representation and the respect and being able to have a voice and be at the table and making those decisions. And this, I'm kind of bleeding over into the systemic racism thing, but, I would implore everybody to look at their particular organizations, whether that be a business, whether it be a church, whether it be an educational institution, whatever. What does your leadership team look like? What does your board of directors look like? Those types of things. So those are the ways that Native Americans are marginalized, and that's a huge threat to tribal sovereignty.
Wonderful. Marlon, same question, same both questions.
Well, I feel like after going after those two, I have to shift my words around, but I think we all have the same concept and the same mind frame, just more so of, thinking about in a situation to where I may not have the same resources that someone around me was, in my neighborhood, or just because of the skin tone, they may have better resources, or they may get a different choice of words towards them because they're a different skin tone. And I like to revert back to real life stories and realizing that, I have 2 biracial kids, and Tim and I have been together for 10 years friendship wise, and he's been one of my mentors. And I've always looked to him to see how he handles his kids, because his kids are, mixed and my kids are mixed. And I kind of want my kids to have the, same path that his kids have gone down. And Tim has been through this 10 to 15 years more than I have. And I would ask Tim, like, how do you feel about, Peyton or Carson being looked at because they're a student athlete or an athlete first, and just not having those same resources. And it's just one of those things to where if we alone limit our self-resources and not, scratch the surface and dig deeper and figure out how we can get the same resources, we're going to continue to be marginalized. And I think that just having my own kids, it's one of those scary situations to where, I'll use my daughter as an example. She went to the doctor the other day and came back and her paperwork said white. And I looked at her and I was like, she's not white. She's mixed. And I wanted to call the doctor and ask him, how can you change this to where it's correct? She's, what do you have for her? What is she? Is she other? But I also thought that maybe they put white because she may get seen sooner, or she may get a different doctor because she's white. That's the first thing that crossed my mind. And it's crazy that we talked about marginalization, because I thought that, oh, maybe because they see my wife take the kids to the doctor more often than the dad. Tim doesn't take his kids to the doctor often, and not that saying he won't, but it's just the simple fact that the mom is probably going to take the kids to the doctor 9 times out of 10. And for them to marginalize that and see that my wife taking the kids to the doctor, oh, she's white because they're with a white parent. They don't know if she's adopted or whatever the case may be. But that's my experience, and that's my thoughts of, okay, the resources that my daughter have to choose from, or the bracket she has to choose from, she won't know until we talk about those. Or the doctors, did they take the time to think about that and say, this parent is obviously Marlon Lobban, he's black, she's white, what should we put down here? But the first thing that crossed my mind was, oh, maybe because if they put white, she may get seen first, or she may get a better opportunity to get a better doctor. Not saying all doctors are great, but in all reality, there's levels to everything that you do in life. The best of the best are going to go to those that can get the best. And I felt like just looking at that paperwork, it showed me, and today, just literally 3 days ago, I saw it and I was like, what? And my wife kind of played it off, but I'm just looking like, no, this is something that we can fix. And they need to know about that. So just the lack of resources and not being in the same category as everyone else. And when our constitutional rights say we're fair and we're equal and everybody has the same rights, but it's not the same for everyone. So just my thoughts and my experience.
Awesome.
Well, I can tell you, Marlon says he looks to me for guidance as a mentor. He's got it pretty good. His wife and my wife are very similar in their demeanor, which means we're scared of both of them. So we just let them have the kids, and you make the decision, and I'll just stay out of the way. So I make it really simple on myself. I don't argue. Happy wife, happy life, that whole thing. So I just don't argue with it. So you got it. Okay. It's all right.
Well, and Marlon, that's, and Marcia, you talked on systematic racism. You talk about, having the same resources, doing some research over the course of time, going back to World War II, 98% of all the money in the GI Bill went to white people, even though 10 to 15% of the people in the war were people of color. So I've got a foot up on you already, Marlon. My dad took advantage of the GI Bill. I'm guessing that I've never asked him and he's long passed, but I'm guessing that's probably how he built his first house, which again is an opportunity that the majority of folks of color in World War II never got. I'm going to go back to Marcia on that, because you did bring up systematic racism. That's one of the ones that slapped me in the face when I took a look at that. What are some other examples that you can, if you've got a doubter, because I know you're not afraid to confront some folks who perhaps are misinformed. How have you discussed this over the course of the years?
Well, initially, I was reluctant to, because, I was taught at a very young age never to use my race as a means to an end. And I really, really, really tried to live up to that. But Anne asked me the question about being, on the flip side of being marginalized. I was the only I don't remember if it was Native American or person of color in the Sioux Falls School District professional staff. And I got interviewed by the Argus leader for it. And I was asked, to be on, the Minority Affairs Committee and all these different committees. And I often wondered, are they asking me to be on this committee because they think I'm worthy and they think that my voice, is worthy of being heard and representing others? Or are they doing it because there's a quota that needs to be met? And I always struggled with that. Kind of even today, you know, I kind of struggle with that too, just because that was ingrained in me that I should never use my race as a means to an end, or play the race card. And so it took me a lot of years before I was willing to, you know, put myself out on a limb and speak to those types of things. And now I'm like 62 years old and I don't care anymore. So I just say whatever. But, you know, it bothered me for a long time. And I've been, you know, the institutional racism, I believe that I have been subject to that. And that is giving people of color not the same advantages as non-people of color, you know, even though, you know, you have the same qualifications and resume and that type of thing. I truly believe that it was, that I was a victim of that. And that hurt me for a long time because I always tried to, you know, I did everything that I was supposed to do. I went to college, I got my degree. I went right into the teaching field like a month after I graduated. I taught for several years. I got myself a job. I taught myself for several years. I went on to get my master's degree. I got my master's degree. I served on so many committees at the local level, state level, even the national level. I was on some committees, some NEA committees. And I felt like that, you know, I felt like I had good, you know, I had good evaluations at school. I was a good teacher, you know, I related well to my students, but yet I couldn't get past that hump of getting into the field of administration, which was what I got my master's degree in, was secondary educational administration. So, you know, it brought me back to, and I posted this on Facebook one time, it brought me back to the movie Selena. If any of you guys have ever seen that movie, and her dad is talking to her about being American and being Mexican, and you got to be twice as good. You're not good enough for the Americans. You're not good enough for the Mexicans, and it's exhausting. And that's exactly the way I felt going through my career. You know, when I was trying to you know, climb the ladder, if you will, and it is exhausting. And after a while, you just kind of, you know, I just kind of gave up. I just kind of was like, well, you know, I don't have that many more years left. I'll just write it out where I am. And maybe that probably wasn't the right attitude to have, but I was exhausted. So you know, that's kind of my story of institutionalized racism. And I don't even remember if that was the question that you were asking me or.
Doesn't matter. That was a great answer, no matter what the question was. And by the way, I'm just now noticing the comments on the side, so I will get to some of those. I'm not very bright, so I will get to those. But I want to follow up on something you said, Marcia. Marlon, have you ever been a token?
Yes, I have, and I think Tim could attest to this too. Marcia probably as well. I have, over my course of the years of being, you know, a professional or an adult, that I can realize certain things. I have come accustomed to being the only one in the room, being the only one in the store, being the only one in the line, or being the guy that's different, whether it's my beard, my hair, or my skin tone. I've come accustomed to that, and I've been the token to where, you know, like she kind of said, when I worked in the Sioux Falls School District for a long time, great place to work, and I met with a professor that worked at Augustana just this past year, and she kind of talked to me about they needed more, and I kind of pushed, like, what do you mean they need more? Like, explain. Like, I knew what she was saying, but I wanted to hear it from her, like, we need more people like you, and I'm like, people, like, there's men everywhere, there's big guys 6'2", 250 pounds everywhere, like. And she kind of flat out, well, we need more Black guys in the schools, we need more. And I don't know, Tim is probably the only Black guy I know that doesn't work with behaviors, in the sense that here in Sioux Falls, if you're Black and you work in the school district, I felt that you're put into the behavior area to work with the kids that may be similar to you or come from a different area, that may be from a different country or just don't have a mom and dad, and they put the athlete or the guy that can relate to them because I come from a different area. And they kind of ask you those questions in the interview when they make those decisions. They kind of say who can relate to little Jaquan or little Janessa or somebody, and not who can relate to Timothy or Joseph, and just those things that, not saying that the system is put against us in a racist way, but those are things that, like I said, I sat back and realized when I've sat in 8 or 9 interviews for the behavior specialist or behavior facilitator position, those what they were looking for. And I fit the mold because of where I come from, and I've been the token one. I was the only one in the school district, well, not the school district, at my school, that the kids of my color or kids of struggles can relate to. Oh, Mr. Lowe, because Mr. Lowe is from, this area, or Mr. Lowe can get down and talk to them and say, yeah, I've eaten hot dog without a bun before. I've done those things, and like I keep going back to Tim. Tim's a history teacher, and he's a behavior facilitator in his own sense, but let's be honest, he's in a very white area. So Tim may not see the behaviors up front, and he may see the behaviors behind the doors. That's different than what little Jaquan didn't eat food last night, then Timothy, mom and dad's going through divorce. So I've been the token one. And I'm comfortable with that because I know that I can hold my own, but at the same time, I know it's not fair to the guy that isn't getting that opportunity because he may have misspelled something on his application, or his name may be a little different than Marlon Lobban. My name is a French name, and you probably, if you saw me and you probably picked my name out of Marlon and Michael, you probably wouldn't go wrong. And then when you see me and you see Michael, you probably be like, oh, we should have chose Michael. But when I go in, I'm going to try to knock the interview out of the park and hold my own. And so I can be that token one to make sure that somebody coming behind me is going to be successful. So yes,
Okay.
I've been a token one.
Excellent. And I want to follow up on that with paraphrasing a question, kind of wrapping it in. Tim, I'm going to follow up on this, and but sort of put my own twist too. All right, so being the token person, if that gets you to the table, then obviously you want to make the most of that. But how much of it is the balance between being token and just being a bunch of benevolent white folks with some guilt who need other faces in the room to meet a quota? How do you feel that?
Before you ask Tim that
Marlon,
question,
yeah,
I will tell you, like I said, Tim's my mentor, and Tim pulled me aside last week and talked to me about football and kind of gave me a mentor moment, and essentially he kind of relayed to me that somebody's always watching, whether it's your superiors or your other coaches or friends, or somebody's always watching. So you have to be able to make sure that you're leaving the correct path for somebody else to follow down. So that's what I would just chime in and say, like, somebody's always watching, and whatever you're doing, do you want it to be seen? And if you don't want it to be seen, what can you be doing to make sure that it is something that's going to help the next person in line? And let's be honest, Tim's older than me, but I know when I'm done and all said and done, he would be one of the people that I write down in my book that, like, hey, this has helped me get this way, and this is why I do it, because he did it and he was successful doing it. And I know he feels good about it, and I want to feel good about it as well. But at the same time, it's just not enough of us that are able to get that opportunity to say, hey, Marlon, somebody's watching, or hey, the next person behind me, somebody's watching. Now you have to make sure you lead the path and make sure somebody else can follow it. So go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
No, that was beautiful. Tim? Yeah.
I think Marlon speaks on that. I think for me, being one of the first, I didn't have anybody to help blaze the path. So in a lot of ways, I was laying the path myself, and so when guys like Marlon come behind me, I try to use my experience in the in and outs that I've learned along the way, sometimes good, sometimes bad, to help them have a straighter path, much like you would do with your kids or anywhere else. Hey, listen, think of things this way, or be looking out for this, or like I tell Marlon, someone's always looking. Make sure you're doing the right thing or trying to do the right thing. I think the difference for me, I was actually surprised to get my job. Most people don't know where Garretson is, but Garretson, South Dakota is a small town, about 30 minutes northeast of Sioux Falls. And having sight unseen, didn't know anything about it, went and got hired as the football coach there, took over for a guy who had been there for 40 years and was a Hall of Famer. And I'm walking into a situation I had no clue about. And so really was a 23-year-old kid and had to blaze my own path and had all of these things as the only African-American in the entire town. I lived in Sioux Falls, but I traveled there every day. And so, you had to make it a point to meet the people and get involved with the community and meet the parents. And then I started teaching there. And so that became even more. But I think one of the problems we run into around here, speaking on Sioux Falls, is our school district has let it be known. They let it be known a couple years ago that they wanted more people of color within their district. I'd say about 5 years later, I don't see much difference. So saying something and actually doing something are two different things. And I can say, in all honesty, I've applied for a number of jobs. I've applied for a few coaching jobs over the last few years. There have been times I would say I've applied at Sioux Falls O'Gorman and Sioux Falls Roosevelt and Sioux Falls Washington and Sioux Falls Lincoln. And there have been times where 15 years of head coaching experience and 15 years in the classroom hasn't even got me an interview. And you just say, okay, what is that about? The only, and I know they know, and I know people within the schools and so on and so forth. And so you try to make those connections and you say those things, but are we truly trying? Or are we just saying? So it goes to what you said, Mike. We're just dealing with some people who feel bad. We got to get somebody in here. We said it, so we got to get somebody in here. And that's not what we want. You want the opportunity based on what you've accomplished. I'm not applying for a head football coaching job because I've never been a head football coach and don't have any experience running a program. I'm not applying for a teaching job because I've never been in a classroom. I've done both. And I think I've done both at a fairly successful level. And so it's things like that where you have to stop and wonder what's going on behind the scenes, that these opportunities aren't being given to those who are qualified. I understand if you don't want to give somebody who's not qualified, that's fine. But when you look at some of the things, and I don't speak ill about people. I applaud people for the opportunities they get. But when you look around and you say, okay, well, they gave the job to this guy and he's never done this before. When I started out, that was the very reason why I couldn't get jobs, because I had never done it before. So, what is the end game? How do we break down those walls? How does the good old boy network get broken into so there's no longer a good old boy network, but a good person network? So that Marcia has the opportunity to get the administrative job, or Marlon has the opportunity to be in a classroom and not just in behaviors. How do we get those walls to be shattered and broke so that everybody has a fair playing field?
And by the way, for those of you that are new, Tim what was your winning percentage? About 70% over the course of your career?
Not quite 70. 69.5 maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. So listen, we're not talking about somebody unqualified here. This is a coach who knows what the hell he's doing and was very, very good at what he did. And kids today, my son is 38, all right? And my son played against Tim's teams the first year that Tim was coaching. I know kids that are 38 years old that if Tim called them and said, I need a wall broken through, they would simply ask what time and where. So the kids adored him and did over the course of time. So again, that's just one of those opportunities that is, head scratching at best. All right, I'm going to completely break from this. We'll get back to it for a moment. Marcia, I'm going to throw you an oddball question. Can you remind people, especially this week, why dressing up at Halloween as a Native American is an incredibly bad idea.
It's called cultural misappropriation. If you've never heard that term, it's damaging to our people because it mocks our, well, you know, if you've never heard that, it's like adopting elements of one culture by members of another culture, but the controversy arises when the dominant culture appropriates from disadvantaged minority cultures. So to dress up as a Indian princess or a chief or whatever at Halloween does a disservice to, you know, our culture and our people because it doesn't represent who we are. Just like Native American mascots, Chief Wahoo and Washington Redskin guy and all that, it damages the self-esteem of our kids because they look at, you know, they're on national TV watching drunk white guys with face paint on and chicken feathers in their hair, and they're like mortified. Well, that's not who we are. That has nothing to do with our beliefs, our value systems, our ceremonies, you know, those types of things. So I would just go back and say it's just very damaging to children. And it's damaging to adults too, don't get me wrong, but it's very damaging to our youth. And we don't want that for them.
Yeah, and Marcia is always focused on the kids too. If you want to go be a Viking, I give you permission, all right? White people we have never been oppressed in our lives, all right? So go ahead and steal that culture all you want. I'm half Danish, half Norwegian, be a Viking, all right?
Yeah, but so what I said was the dominant culture appropriates from disadvantaged minority cultures. That's the key.
Yes, absolutely. All right.
Mike, to advance on that, the feeling that you get from a situation like that, that I've experienced is either well, what's the big deal? What are you making a big deal out of this for? What's the big deal? Or you take it too seriously. Gosh, it's just a joke. It's just what they don't understand is it's not a joke. You know, you know, when you walk around and you act like you're, you know, the gangster black guy with the pants sagging and the afro for Halloween and I'm a pimp, you know, no, that I don't even walk around like that because that's not how I want to be portrayed. So what makes you think that I find that appropriate to be a representation of who we are? And I think in a lot of ways, that is what is seen that is whether it's Chief Wahoo or the pimp for Halloween or whatever, those are seen as norms. You know, they aren't necessarily seen as the exception. You know, for a lot of people, those are the rules. Well, this is what these people do. Isn't that what you guys do? I used to work for South Dakota Tourism, and I got a phone call from a lady in New York City, and she asked if she could come and see a Cowboys Indian fight. And I went, oh, I'm thinking stage show out west, Black Hills, summertime, you know, maybe son, I'll look it up, whatever. Looked it up, said, ma'am, I don't see anything like that. To which she said, no, I mean, actually a cowboy and Indian fight. She actually thought that in South Dakota, Native Americans and cowboys got together around pier at some point and pulled out their guns and their bows and arrows and had a free-for-all. And my first response to that was, you're pretty sick. They want to go watch some people kill each other, I guess. And the second thing was, what kind of world do we live in that we still assume that these cultural identities still exist? You know, and so again, we're in South Dakota. That's somebody in New York City. But that just goes to show the disconnect we have in our own country with each other. You know, we get so concerned about what's happening overseas or what's happening in Afghanistan or what's happening in Mexico or what's happening in Europe. And within our own country, we are so disjointed. We don't have a feel for one another. How can we be concerned about the other things?
Tim, I would add to that. a couple of years ago when my daughter and family were living in Springfield, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. My oldest granddaughter's second grade teacher asked if I would come talk to the children about Native American Day. Sure, yeah, okay, I can. I mean, I'm like a high school and college teacher. How am I going to talk to these second graders? You know, so I enlisted the help of the pro elementary teacher who was my sister-in-law who taught third grade in Flandreau for many years. And I said, help me come up with a lesson plan for these kids. So we came up, and I was speaking to like 90 kids, second graders. And DC area, it's fairly diverse. I walked in, you know, dressed like this or whatever. And we were in the cafeteria, and as the kids were filing in, I could tell that they were looking around like, well, where is she? Where is Eva's grandma? Who's this speaker? They couldn't figure out where the speaker was, because I fully think they intended to see somebody with a buckskin dress and feathers in her hair. And I almost felt like they were disappointed when it was actually me, because, you know, that's how they see Native Americans, relegated to the past.
Unbelievable. All right, Marlon, you're up next. I see a lot of questions over here, and frankly, one of the things that started HEAL and a lot of these discussions, Black Lives Matter. How did you chat with that about your kids?
Well, just in general, my kids, I think that Black Lives Matter is, I tell people, one, do your research. You're going to feel opinionated either way it goes. But I think for me, being Black is not that I don't matter. And you being white, it's not that you don't matter. But I do know that there is a problem when it comes to issues with people of color, dealing with somebody that's not of color, of actions towards someone. And what I've taught my daughters and my son is to mainly that the color of your skin shouldn't matter. Right is right and wrong is wrong. And I think that if I saw Mike on the street, I wouldn't want to kill him because he's white. And I think if Mike saw me on the street, he wouldn't want to kill me if he's Black. But everybody's not Mike and everybody's not Marlon. There are those token ones that disagree with that. And so in the sense that I think the message is right now, the issue that we're faced with is that Black lives are being taken, or people of color are being taken more at a higher rate compared to others that are not Black or brown or not white. And yeah, you can look at the numbers statistically where, I don't know, population wise, we're a lot smaller, but if we reverse the population, then I don't think people will be complaining because there's not as many to lose. There's a lot of people right now. We don't have many and we're losing consistently. So it's like, that's where the movement comes from. Me personally, I believe it's not a movement, it's my life. And I say to people that believes in the Black Lives Matter movement, go for it, do whatever you believe. But in all reality, 2 years from now, less than 2 years from now, are we still going to be talking about how Marlon matters or how Marcy matters or how Tim matters or how Mike matters? Because I agree, all lives do matter. But right now in this moment where we are in 2020, and let's not go back, 1960, 1940, or, before I was born, it was struggling in. Now everything's on the forefront. And so people can see it and people can hear about it. And where we are in Little Old South Dakota, we're in a fishbowl. We don't want that big shark coming in and saying, we want somebody to come in and start a riot, a race war. But we're literally in a fishbowl. We're just waiting for one fish to come get bigger and just say, you know what, I can't fit in this bowl. I'm going to explode. I'm going to make the bowl go boom. But I do truly believe, me being Black, I've been Black for 32 years, I'm not changing. So my life, not that the fact that it matters more than yours. But right now, the people of my complexion are struggling to get by more than you are. And how can I not listen to that? How can I not want to see change for you to be successful if you think that, or for you not to struggle, or for you not to get pulled over and not worry about whether or not you're going to be, profiled, or whether or not you're just going to get a slap on the wrist and say, go the other way, or then, whether or not I truly believe I'm going to make it home or not. I think if Mike got pulled over, Mike's probably going to not worry about going, he knows he's going to go home. If I get pulled over, I'm thinking in the back of my head, okay, is everything in line? Do I, where's my car registration? And should I reach? Should I grab? Should I do? And that's scary. And so I think that's where the movement comes from, in more sense to where, like, we can see it now. And a lot of people say, what's the big deal? If you follow the law, or you pay attention, or you don't do arrestable things, you may not get in trouble. But in all reality, why are you arresting me? Why are you detaining me? And if I do detainable things, then detain me. If I do arrestable things, then arrest me. If I do things that cause me to be profiled, for instance, that, hey, this black guy is running around the street naked, come get me. You can't say I'm not, because I am. But in all reality, in times like this, we're looking for a good time, but we're struggling to have a good time because it's scary, because we don't know. Like, I go to work at 2:30 in the morning. The scariest thing is walking out my garage, getting in my car and getting in my drive and driving in the dark. And I'm like, I got to take a back road to get to FedEx. And if I get pulled over, they're going to believe me, because it doesn't look like I'm going to work, because I don't have a shirt that says FedEx and it's glowing in the dark. And I'm going to, only thing I have is a badge that says I'm going to FedEx. But 9 times out of 10, I'm not going to be able to say, hey, I'm going to FedEx. This is what I'm doing. They're going to, hey, what are you doing? Where are you going? And so, yes, the reality of the struggle of Black people or people of color is real. And for people not to say it's not, then they may have never faced a situation that we have faced, and they don't know how to react in that situation because they never faced it. And when it's put in your face, or I look at my in-laws, they look at me and they say, hey, how can we raise our grandkids in a way that you want them to be raised? And I tell them all the time, you're doing a great job. They said, no, we're different. We want to make sure that we're doing it the right way, that how you want it to be done. Tell them, no, my kids need to know there's two sides to everything, and we're one family. As long as you love them, I don't care. So just having people worry that, like, oh, this Black Lives Matter is going to take over. Like I said, do your research, think about it, have fun, do whatever you want to do with it. But in all reality, there is a problem, and it's up to us as people to try to fix that. And if you want to fix it, then be a part of the solution. If you don't want to fix it, then we're going to continue to have this conversation and try to fix it. So that's just where I stand with that.
Thank you. Tim, we're going to get to you, and we're just about out of time here. We don't want to overstay our welcome. Colin Kaepernick, your thoughts on Colin Kaepernick when he first did what he did, the fact he still can't get a job in the NFL, and there's a lot of quarterbacks that just plain and simple stink. By the way, Colin Kaepernick went in the New Mexico Hall of Fame the other day. He is the only college quarterback in the history of colleges to run for more than 4,000 yards and pass for more than 10,000. So he can play. We saw he could play. He just hasn't had the opportunity. Tim, I'll let you take it from there.
Well, I think why I started Operation HEAL, and HEAL stands for helping everyone attain love. And so why I started that was to keep the message where the message needed to be. I think when BLM, when Black Lives Matters came along, you oftentimes get sidetracked by the things that you see. The Black Lives Matter movement was not about rioting and violence and all those things. Those aren't people who are in the Black Lives Matter movement. Those are people using the Black Lives Matter movement to do their own thing. And it's just like any other thing. You've always got people who will use something to their advantage. I wasn't running out looting and robbing stores. Of course, if I'd have been doing that, I probably could have expected a knock on the door from my mom, because that'd have been the last thing that happened to me, because that wasn't happening. But the biggest thing is, I think a guy like Colin Kaepernick, you can look back now and say, hey, you know what? He took a stand on something that he believed in. He was criticized for it. Did he do everything perfect? No, but none of us do. But he was willing to take a stance. He was willing to put a career on the line, which has cost him his career, for a stance. Now, because it cost Colin his career, it's twofold with him. One, he will forever be respected by African-American players. They will always say, hey, he took the hit and he didn't have to take the hit, and so on and so forth. On the other side, it will always be one of those, because the owners have put him out of football, have kept him out of football, it will always be one of those, just like we talk about institutional racism, it will be one of those where players may be more afraid to stand up on their own for fear of retribution or losing their careers. Very rare in our lives do we get someone like Colin Kaepernick who's willing to say, you know what, doesn't matter what it costs me, it needs to be said. You know, in my dad's world, you know, that was Muhammad Ali. You know, and players and guys like that, Muhammad Ali or Bill Russell, or you know, players of the past who said, you know, Jackie Robinson, who said, you know what, I have to endure this for the betterment of other people. It's very rare, especially in sports, that you get people who are willing to go above and beyond and say, you know what, outside of this sport, I have to be more than just the basketball player or more than the football player, because I have things to say, and I can represent people who are underrepresented. Very rare that you're going to find that. For me, as far as the Black Lives Matter thing goes, like I said, my whole goal was to steal back the narrative. The narrative was social injustice. The narrative was putting the onus on equality and making sure that people are being treated the right way, not just Black people, but all people of color and all people together. That should be the goal. Ultimately, we all should be on an even playing field. You know, do I believe, I teach U.S. history, and we talk about institutional racism. We talk about redlining, and redlining still exists in most major cities of today. And for those who don't know what redlining is, it's the systematic placement of people by virtue of ethnicity or color or race or whatever the case may be. And if you go into major cities, if you go into Denver, where I'm from, if you go to the northeast part of Denver, you're going to find a large Latino community. If you go on the northeast side of Denver, you're going to find a large African-American community. If you go on the southeast side of Denver, it's almost exclusively Caucasian. Why have those levels, those lines never been crossed? Because the opportunities have never been given to cross those lines. The jobs aren't there. Okay, the opportunities to succeed aren't there. The schools in those neighborhoods are poor. How do you overcome those things? You have to be willing to fight the injustices, and you have to be able to stand up and say, hey, this is wrong. What do we need to fix it? How can we help, as Lo said, how can we help Janessa be on the same level as Julie? The only way to do that is to break down those barriers. And as my mom used to say, you get more bees with honey than you can vinegar. So, you know, you can burn down the village and you can yell at people all you want, but chances are they're going to stop listening to you at some point. So why go through the process of burning down villages and yelling at people? It's not getting you anywhere. So we have to do forums like this, and we have to be willing to open our hearts and our minds and our attitudes to listen and hear. And not only hear, but then make the commitment to follow up and do. And so I think those are the things, when I hear about the Black Lives Matter movement, those are the things that stand out to me, because the Black Lives Matter movement is important, because Black lives do matter. but the movement's been stolen by some people who don't have the Black Lives Matter movement as their top priority. And so I think that's why we have to bring the attention back to the topics at hand and deal with the issues and not create more issues.
Awesome. That is a wonderful way to wrap up. I am going to ask one more question, and if you have an answer to this, give it quickly. If not, that's fine. You aren't going to be graded. Marcia, for more information, if people are looking to watch a movie, read a book, whatever the case may be, what would you recommend?
I like anything by Joseph Marshall III. He's very good. The Lakota Way is a good read. It's got some good historical information in there, but also a lot of really cool myths and legends. He also wrote The Journey of Crazy Horse, which is a great book too. As far as movie, I guess one of the movies that really hit me hard this winter when I was quarantined and I was watching a lot of Netflix was a movie called Indian Horse. And it's about Native children being taken away from their families and placed in residential schools. It's very raw, it's very real, but I've studied this subject for a long time, and it still just shook me to the core. So I guess those three things.
Awesome. Marlon?
Just a couple authors that I like to read. Toni Morrison, and then of course James Baldwin. Those are you can just Google those names, honestly, and they can almost pop up just a few different, books that they have written and things that they have wrote about and all this stuff like that. But movie-wise, I like to just think more realistic. It's a movie called Higher Learning. It's pretty graphic, but at the same time, it's kind of like about a black culture going to a prestigious college, and the prestigious college have a group of Nazis that don't like them, and they kind of just go through it, and it just shows you back in the 90s what they saw. Now that we're still seeing it now, So Higher Learning, and then also, like I said, those two authors. And those are just some. I'm also reading a book right now called The Boys of Auburn Hills, I believe. It's about a basketball group of boys playing basketball, how in the 1980s, how the crack epidemic hit them and how it affected their way of life and stuff like that. So just a few things that I just go through every now and then when I get the chance to do some things like that.
Wonderful. Tim?
I would say from the author standpoint, Alice Walker. Big Alice Walker fan. Also related by that much, Langston Hughes, the old poet, Langston Hughes. A lot of the work, Harlem Renaissance in those areas. That's one of those third branch on the left side type of relationship type of thing. So Langston Hughes. As far as movies go, Do the Right Thing by Spike Lee. It's a great movie that I've watched several times. Love it. I think what was the other one? I think one of the more Hidden Figures. I don't know if anybody's seen that movie, Hidden Figures. Great movie. Shows the positive aspects of how these three African American ladies overcome institutional racism and those things to achieve high status in the NASA program. Awesome movie. And so I think movies like that, they don't always have to be we overcome the victory in the tough way to show you the aspects of overcoming something. So Hidden Figures was a great movie. So Alice Walker for books, Langston Hughes for in poetry and writing. And then, like I said, Do the Right Thing by Spike Lee. He's one of my favorite directors. And then the movie Hidden Figures was awesome. So
wonderful. Guys, that was great. There's also a ton of documentaries out there that you can find. Do the research. Marcia, thank you so much. Marlon, thank you so much. Tim, thanks so much, and for putting this together. Thea, thank you so much for the format, and bless all of you for showing up and wanting to open your minds and listen to me ask dumb questions and get wonderful answers from our. Can we give them the virtual applause? There you go. Awesome. Thea, thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone. So glad to have you here. This was very important. I'm so glad that everyone was here to listen. I have saved some of the comments that are in the chat. If anyone would like a copy of the chat, I'd be glad to email it to you. Just send me an email at OLLI, OLLI, @usd.edu. I'd be happy to send you that. There's some great comments in there. A lot of good suggestions for literature and things like that too. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for all your hard work. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
It was
you.
awesome. Thank you.
Hey, Mike,
Yes.
I'm still wanting to be that token Native American person on
Oh,
your
I know. I thought
Hall
about
of Fame committee.
I thought about bringing that up, as a matter of fact. Yeah. Yeah, a Native woman. We need a Native woman, plainly and simply.
Right. Okay.
So if you know one you can suggest, let me know.
I'll wait to hear from you.
Yeah, we haven't been meeting. All of our meetings have been canceled because we don't, our banquet is, we've now put that off till next June. So,
Oh, it's June now. Okay.
yeah, yep.
Okay.
So
All
yeah,
right.
so believe me, I will be in touch.
Okay.
All right.
All right.
Guys, thanks again so much. That was wonderful.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank
You
you.
bet.
Thank you so much.